This place was known as the place for juvenile crime. It had the highest negative statistics when it came to crime. We've made some progress since then, and I think today, with a lot of the partnerships that we've developed, we've come a long way, and people now are moving back to our precinct. We have new homes being built, banks are opening, businesses are open, you know, brand new grocery stores of all kinds, small business, big business. So I see a positive thing that's happening, and again, I think it's because of a good partnership that comes together with people, business, and law enforcement coming together.
It's definitely been a great area of redevelopment, and I wonder, I read that you had the Parole Violators Task Force. I wonder if that program had anything to do with it, or are there any other programs that you can certainly...
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest ones that we started, where we send a message, and we're still going after parole violators. I believe that if a person... first of all, I believe in parole. Some people may not believe in parole because they feel that we let them out too early, but if a person lives by the conditions that they agree to, I don't have a problem with that. I think we should give people some opportunities like that.
But we don't give them enough opportunities when people come out of prisons. When people come out of prisons, they can't get an apartment, they can't get a job.
I agree with you, and those, I think, are issues we need to address. You're right. Who wants to hire, who wants to hire an ex-con?
Ex-felon.
I have in the past.
No, but I'm talking about for the general practice. You may be an exception. And I think we need to have more of that, so that if we're going to release someone from prison, there needs to be a process where these individuals have the right to work.
Well,
I agree with you.
Prisons themselves, the premise that we have today is wrong. It's incarceration. It is not rehabilitation. It's not job training for people who have never had anything other than...
And you know what? All the statistics show that you're absolutely right, because the recidivism rate for somebody who comes out of prison is extremely high.
And why do we have these people up in Austin not working to make it any better?
Well, you're talking about politics. What is politics? You either got good politics, bad politics, or politically correct issues, which doesn't address the problems. I mean, I think if we can convince people to understand why it's important to make a difference, if we send someone to prison, that when they come out, they can become part of mainstream society in terms of law-abiding. If we can convince them of that, you've hit on something.
Well, there needs to be more programs that prevent recidivism and more rehabilitation programs in prison.
If I had, let me give you an example. I did a little study years ago. I was noticing that a couple of middle schools were averaging 200 students absent every day out of a population of 1,200. And I realized something's wrong here. The kids go to school and they skip. The parents drop them off. They go out to the back door. We need to do more of this, but nobody's really addressing it, because it's not my problem. It's a parent's problem. It's a school problem. So a pointing finger sometimes become a way of life for us, and we're not part of the solution, and I think that's important. So I did a little simple thing and told the principals, I'm going to assign a deputy to your school. Give me the list of students that are absent, and I'm going to send deputies to their homes tonight and knock on their doors and find out why they were absent today. Well, all of a sudden, from 200, it went down to 50. Can you imagine? Wow. We increased it in one day. So I know that we can make a difference if we really put our hearts together and our minds. And that's the issue. If your heart and your mind can work together, it's not just doing something because it's intellectually good or correct. It's got to have some emotion behind it, some passion, some care, where it's really going to make a difference. And I don't think we're there yet. I mean, we're not there.
Right. There's so many issues that can be theorized so many times and come out a certain way, but there's a certain way that is actually being practiced. And for example, one of the big ones that I kind of just want to jump into and see what your opinion is, because you've actually been interviewed by Dean Becker, I believe, and had some interesting viewpoints. But for example, some of the laws that we have that have been on paper for decades and just don't make sense, as far as possession laws, for example, for small amounts of marijuana. Now, if you factor in the amount of time that it takes for an officer to arrest this person, detain them, book them, and how much time it's taking for a non-violent, minimal amount of possession, a nonviolent, essentially criminal, we'll use that word, to put them in jail. This is time that an officer is being taken away from the streets where he could be getting someone who is necessarily a violent person or helping other people. Now, what do you think about this?
You know, I wrote a paper when I was in college, and it was called The Victimless Crimes. And, you know, why we should really rethink and relook at these victimless crimes, not just because of the cost that it was, you know, creating, but just because of the fact that if we as a society, we're not really thinking, you know, outside the box anymore. We're
Right.
I don't know how it is that we're thinking. You know, I don't know. I don't know if we're thinking just because we want to feel good, and so we create laws to feel good. And whether it has an impact or not, that's another issue. So
Right.
when you're talking about, you know, the drug laws, and I mean, of course, I don't think we've had an impact. I mean, you know, you're talking about how costly it is.
And it's more
costs
available
about
to
$44
children.
billion a year to enforce some of these marijuana drug laws. Now, that's including enforcement, incarceration, and the judicial part of it. We spend $44 billion a year after a drug that is normally nonviolent. People don't smoke marijuana and go home and beat up their wives. They don't alcohol, they do. They go to the bar, they have a bad day, they go home, they can have a bad night with their wife. Person with marijuana are usually very passive. They're easy to get along with. And yet I just see so many unnecessary arrests for a simple
I think the challenge for us is how are we going to convince society or community that this is the step to take. That's what I think our challenge is. Because to try to convince the politicians or the elected officials to do something, I mean, it's just
That's
like
an enormous
well,
task,
it's just
yeah.
like today. You think Senator Specter just decided to change parties because, you know, he just wanted a new philosophy, or because he saw the writing on the wall? I know you got a call, so we can go
We
to our
do.
caller.
Let's go to the caller. Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, you're on the air.
Yes, good evening to you and the panel. And look, I agree that the marijuana laws are more or less ridiculous. First of all, marijuana is not a drug. A drug is something you make up in a laboratory. If you take chemistry, organic and inorganic, you know, this is nothing that, in fact, the countries that have easy marijuana laws have less problems. You see, America is sadistic in its laws. America is cruel in its laws. See, America has not, they don't do anything for the people. They do things to show that they can oppress the people. Just